Okay, good morning, everyone. I think we might get started. So my name is Professor Marcus Frutiger. I'm from the Institute of Ophthalmology at UCL, and I'm the Deputy Director of Education at the Institute. So welcome everyone to today's session on two of our programs which we run at the Institute. So there'll be an overview of the Bioscience Entrepreneurship MSc and the research pathways in advanced therapeutics in both of the tracks of that program. The Bioscience Entrepreneurship MSc is run by myself, so I'm the program lead for that. For the research pathways in advanced therapeutics, it's Professor Virginia Calder, who's also here. So what we'll do is I will give an overview of the Bioscience Entrepreneurship MSc. I'll show you a few slides. And then I'll hand over to Virginia and to give you an overview of her program together with her colleagues. So Amanda Carr, who's a module lead on Virginia's program, and also some panelists who are current students on that program. So I'll get started with the a brief overview of the Bioscience Entrepreneurship. Once we've given you all these overviews, we'll then go into a Q&A session where you can use the Q&A functionality at the bottom of the Zoom interface. So it's next to the chat. So we're not going to do it via the chat, but via the Q&A. And you just ask any questions you have, and we'll try our best to address them. So to get started, let me share my screen. So here we are. So, as I said, I'll give you the overview of the Bioscience Entrepreneurship MSc. So this is a program which we run together with the School of Pharmacy, the School of Management, and the Population Health Sciences at UCL. So this is a course that sits across multiple faculties and departments across UCL. And it kind of makes sense because entrepreneurship is something that typically spans multiple disciplines. So please note that application deadline is 30th of June. And due to some administrative processes within UCL is a huge university, and there have been different deadlines out, and you may come across different deadlines, but our deadline for this particular course is the 30th of June. So you will come across some other deadlines which they're just kind of auto-filled for us, but the actual deadline for our course is the 30th of June. That is the 30th of June is the last day where you can submit an application. The actual processing of your application will take longer. So it will take a few weeks for your application to go through, and then for us to make a decision whether you get accepted or not, and so on. So that may take a little longer then. But the last day where you can apply for this course is the 30th of June. Okay. And that applies to the Bioscience Entrepreneurship MSc as well as to the research pathways in advanced therapeutics. Okay, so what is this course about? So the Bioscience Entrepreneurship MSc aims, aims to prepare students for a future career in the applied bioscience space. So we're typically targeting students who have ambitions. Give me my pointer up here. Students who have ambitions to be active in the applied bioscience space. So students who want to work in the commercial sector of bioscience in the future. We're looking for the type of students who are self-driven, proactive students with an entrepreneurial and entrepreneurial ambitions. Now, the course is really aimed for students to learn how to develop opportunities in this applied bioscience space. Now, this applied bioscience space is, most typically people associated with the pharmaceutical industry, but there is many other aspects of that. So there is biotech industry, the scientific tools industry that support the pharmaceutical and biotech industry. There's a clinical trials industry. Then there is the research, contract research organizations. There is the devices industry, diagnostics, digital health, and even health is part of that. And all of that obviously is underpinned by venture capital firms, by fundraising entities who support this space to create startup opportunities. Now, the course addresses during this year what is special about the applied bioscience sector, and what are the common processes and the principles in this sector, which is it's different from a normal applied sector. So there's some special unique properties in the bioscience space. There are, for example, there are very strict regulations very often. So there are regulatory limitations, but we're also aiming to identify unmet needs. And obviously you will also learn what the current approaches are in this sector and where the potential opportunities are. Now, we're spreading this task across different departments, as I told you. So the Institute of Ophthalmology, we're running some modules because at the Institute we actually have a very good track record of translating science into clinical applications and into commercial applications, including the creation of spin-out companies. There is the School of Management, which will have a significant input with regards to training you in the managerial aspects and the business aspects of all these processes here. School of Pharmacy and Population Health Sciences, they feed more into the kind of clinical trials area for you to better understand how these potential leads and discoveries that are made here are actually translated into products. So it's as I said earlier, it's a kind of collaboration across different departments at UCL. So at the Institute, we have a total of 5 compulsory modules. So there is one module is digital opportunities, which is run by UBIS. Then we have the science of disease module, which looks at kind of fundamental aspects of pathology and on how we address these pathologies, how we try and cure diseases, what is disease, how do we cure them, and how do we develop medicines. Then Virginia Calder, she runs the research and practice module in this particular MSc, which is a module which we share with the research and pathways in advanced therapeutics. There is also a module run by Carl Matter at the Institute, who's involved with bioscience startups and I'll supervise the research project and business case in the third term. The other compulsory module is run by Fiona Reed from the School of Management, looking at specific aspects of business in bioscience, and there is a whole bunch of optional modules which you can then kind of fine-tune your MSc towards to fit your particular specific interests. So there is a bunch of optional modules from the School of Management, but also School of Pharmacy and the Clinical Trials and Methodology Department. These departments are actually distributed all over London. So the Institute of Ophthalmology is next to Moorfields Eye Hospital in kind of slightly eastern part of London. School of Management have some part of their teaching space. It is at Canary Wharf in the city, but they also have to do some teaching in the UCL Central part in Bloomsbury. School of Pharmacy somewhere in between, and so is the Institute for Clinical Trials. So it's actually spread across central London, which again is a kind of a geographical representation of the cross-cutting nature of this particular course. Our expectations with regards to students is that we anticipate to have students who are self-driven. So what we want is students who can be proactive learners, who have a creative and innovative mindset. And our role as teachers in this course is very much to enable and guide you, to challenge and inspire you, but not to spoon feed you. Our ambition is to guide you and help you to develop yourself, because as an entrepreneur in the future, you will need to have these type of character traits. At UCL, there's plenty of opportunities for you to actually develop further. So obviously, UCL, depending on the metrics, always comes out as one of the top universities worldwide. And we have a huge diversity of students from all over the world. Not only students, but also with regards to the academics that work at UCL. With regards to entrepreneurial opportunities at UCL, because UCL is so big, it is an extremely fertile ground for entrepreneurs. There is many enrichment activities that run out of the Institute and of the Institute of Ophthalmology, but also our partner departments. There is extracurricular courses that are offered by our program. There is hackathons. There is at least 12 student societies with an entrepreneurial focus. Then there is the UCL Innovative Enterprise space. That's the Base KX. Also, you can look that up, you Google it, which contains a hatchery. They also run competitions for startup funding. Then we have the UCL Translational Research Office and the Therapeutic Innovations Networks. So there is plenty of entrepreneurial activities continuously going on at UCL. And then obviously within London, there is a very high concentration of venture builders, seed investors, and angel funders. The outcomes which we aim for in this course for students is really for them to gain an understanding of the sector, of the scientific backgrounds, the structures and the processes and the regulations and so on. So they feel competent that they understand how things work in this particular sector. But we also aim to develop an entrepreneurial mindset in the students and for them to learn, to see opportunities, for them to gain skills and know-how and to develop these opportunities. But the kind of two key aims really are that to make you a stronger entrepreneur. The entrepreneur is somebody with an entrepreneurial mindset, but within a bigger company typically. But they still have an entrepreneurial mindset. They're proactive, creative people. And obviously, the other really important outcome which we aim for is for you to establish contacts, networks, and job opportunities for to follow on after this course. So that's the short overview of the course. I'll stop here, and we can address questions later on once Virginia has gone through her overview of the of her program, and then we'll just address questions for both programs simultaneously. Okay, Virginia, I'll hand over to you.
I think, Virginia, you're on mute.
Hi, sorry about that. If everyone can see my slides, I'll explain a little bit about the course that I run. I'm an immunologist, professor of ocular immunology at the Institute of Ophthalmology, and a graduate tutor. So I have a lot of experience of mentoring postgraduate students, particularly PhD students, those who have chosen to spend some extra time as academics. This course is really exciting for us because it is centered at the Institute of Ophthalmology, but it actually focuses on a number of different diseases. It is not specific to the eye. For any of you who became quite interested in during the pandemic in understanding the acceleration of the COVID-19 research, the clinical trials, the ability to get a vaccine through in a relatively short period of time, you'll appreciate that there are a number of different processes that one has to understand about and adhere to if you're developing a new treatment. And this course is designed to teach you the various different regulatory processes, how to design clinical trials, how many patients you would need for that, but also going back to lab-based bench work, how to run a PCR, how to know if you have enough data points for this data to be statistically analyzed. So we provide you with a lot of different techniques and expertise along the way. If I just go to the next slide, we also have a 2-year course, which is identical to the previous course in the first year, but in the second year, you have the added opportunity of studying in a lab overseas. So we have already got agreements in place with the University of Sydney. There are 2 departments there who are looking forward to accommodating our students for 2 terms in the second year. They have already provided us with a whole list of projects that the students can choose. And depending on the project they choose, we will introduce them to their new supervisor quite early on so that they can plan ahead what sort of techniques they're going to be using, where they're going to be living, what sort of departmental meetings they can attend, etc. So it's a very exciting opportunity for you to work overseas for a while, to improve your networking skills, understand how other departments, how other research centers run their teaching. So going back to the first year of the course, we have compulsory modules, as with all UCL courses. So in term 1, these modules are all run at the Institute of Ophthalmology. And I'm very lucky to have Amanda Carr here on the call. She runs the Stem Cells and Eye Repair module, which not only teaches you all about stem cell treatments, she's obviously interested in treating retinal disease, but she explains how relevant these stem cells can be to treating lots of other diseases affecting different parts of the body. Emily Eden runs the in vivo models in research. And this module is all about understanding in vivo models, for example, zebrafish, also imaging techniques. Obviously in the eye, it's a brilliant place to develop these sorts of imaging systems, but they can be run out for other diseases as well. In term 2, just as Marcus's course is designed, this course allows the students to select a number of optional modules, and these are taken over at main campus. So they have an extensive range of different topics that they can study. They're all relevant to developing advanced therapeutics, of course, but they get to hear from other experts across UCL. They meet students on other courses, and there's a whole range of different assessments that they will be taking for each of these modules, from presenting posters, writing essays, writing abstracts, etc. So that they're developing their presentation skills, their communication skills along the way. In the 3rd term of that first year, they're back at the Institute undertaking a lab-based project. So it's very practical, this course. There's a lot of lab work involved. And we were able to offer, I think, 16 different projects for the 5 students on the course this year to choose from. And I'm pleased to say that all the students were happy with their choices. They were able to take their first choice option. And I have 2 students from the course, 2 current students joining us today, Sunil and Yasmin, and both are very happy to answer any questions about what it's really like to study on this course. And just a little bit about these overseas lab placements. Of course, there is no need. You can do this 2nd year placement within the UK, within UCL if you want. We can arrange that. But ideally, we have several choices already in place. We have agreements in Sydney, as I mentioned. We also have an agreement with the Singapore Eye Research Institute, one of the most prestigious international research institutes for eye research. And I've just finished a call with another Japanese university. It looks like we'll have 4 different universities lined up in Japan, if that's of interest to any of you. So this is just a rather lengthy slide, but it's really just to illustrate the number of different types of skills that you'll be developing. How will this help you get a job or develop your career going forward? Well, you may want to, after this, decide, actually, you really love research, you've had a lot of lab-based experience, and you want to do a PhD. That's the easy option. And yes, you will have met a lot of academics with whom you might choose to study under. However, you've also learned all about clinical trial design. So maybe you fancy joining a clinical trial unit based in a hospital, which specializes in helping ophthalmologists and other clinicians how to design clinical trials, what sort of clinical trials. So you could develop your whole career around that. That's a huge area of development going forward. But other options would be working in a lab, maybe as a lab-based technician, or joining a pharmaceutical company that has laboratories or is interested in marketing or promoting drugs that already have approval. And having learned all about the approval stages for getting drugs through, you'll come in with a much better portfolio and hopefully a better CV that you can impress future employers. So I'm going to stop now sharing and go back to Marcus. I think we can open up this for questions and answers. We have Amanda and the 2 students with us, so please feel free.
So there is, in the Q&A at the bottom, you see the Q&A. You can type any questions in there. So there is a question for the Bioscience Entrepreneurship program. which is, will the course lectures be held in a centralized location? Is it possible to pick up 1 or 2 more optional modules apart from the ones required to complete the basic 180 credits? Okay, so the answer for to the first question is, in the first term, the majority of lectures will be held at the Institute of Ophthalmology. In the second term, there are at the School of Management, School of Pharmacy, so they're kind of all over campus. It's a bit distributed. In the third term, this is the term where you do your thesis, your research project. It's not located to any particular place, so you do that mainly independently. Question number 2, is it possible to pick 1 or 2 more optional modules? So in order to make up your 180 credits, you have to pick from the options which we provide you. But it is possible within UCL to kind of to attend some other modules, but it's not so straightforward because it needs the agreement from the other module, and sometimes these they have limited spaces on there, so I can't guarantee really anything for that. Question number 2. Okay, that's for Virginia. So Virginia, it's a question is there scope to get some entrepreneurial exposure in the research pathways MSc?
I would say yes, there is. Obviously, we will be discussing a lot of new therapies as they're coming through. And so there will be a sense of how these therapies were first discovered, how they were developed, and the potential for developing these further into clinical use. We do share the research and practice module with the Bioscience and Enterprise students. So there will be a lot of networking with those students and a lot of teamwork. I do journal club sessions every week during the 10 weeks of that term. So you'll be working in groups with those other students. Again, also, there are a number of seminars and sessions run at the Institute in both the first and the third terms, to which all of those students would be invited. So I think that you would get a fair amount of entrepreneurial exposure during your time with us.
And I think just to kind of stress that other point, which you made, Virginia, about the shared modules between the Bioscience Entrepreneurship. So these shared modules, you are together with the Bioscience Entrepreneurship students, and it gives you an opportunity to establish, to network within that student cohort as well. And you know, in my opinion, your network, which you develop during your university time, is one of the most important things you walk away with from your education. So to establish contacts with, you know, from other programs where you overlap can potentially be extremely useful for you in the future. Okay. The next question is how are students examined in the Bioscience Entrepreneurship program? It's like on most other programs, it's a mixture of different types of assessments. So it depends on the module. Typically, so some modules, so for example, in my module, there is a journal club presentation, and then they have to create a Wikipedia type of document of where they do their own research. It depends. So some students have to, in the Bioscience Entrepreneurship, we do dragon dance, kind of pitch sessions where students have to pitch to potential, you know, investors. So there's a big diversity of assessments. We do not have multiple choice. really, and we there's not really any exams where you sit there for an hour or so and you just answer questions. The majority of them are more applied assessments. So it's 180. So how many credits are there total in Bioscience Entrepreneurship? It's like with any other MSc. It's 180 credits. It's 60 credits per term. There's 3 terms in 1 year. There is a part-time option where you can do that over 2 years, where you kind of have this 180 credits spread over 2 years. Next question. So I think, yes, thanks, Rosie, I answered that question. So what, in the Bioscience Entrepreneurship, what would a typical week of the course look like? Is there much teaching, or is a lot of the course self-directed learning? Well, it depends what you mean with a lot. So I would say it's probably average for that kind of level, for MSc level. So typically in term 1, for example, for the Bioscience Entrepreneurship, and that's very similar for the research pathways in advanced therapeutics as well, is where you have 4 modules in one term. So there's 4 modules in term 1, and each module you will have a session that's typically maybe 3 hours. So they'll be either in the morning or in the afternoon. So there may be on Monday morning you have a session for 1 module, and then on Tuesday afternoon you have a session for a second module. Thursday another half day, and Friday another half day. So that's kind of how the synchronous teaching is, and then the rest is where you do obviously self-directed learning, and in particular working on the assessments, and that is roughly the same across all courses which we talk about today, and term 1 and term 2. Term 3 is very different. So term 3 for the Bioscience Entrepreneurship is primarily self-directed research and thesis writing, developing you do some background research and you develop a business plan, which you do together with the supervisor, but it's very much self-driven. And in Virginia's course, it's time in the lab at the bench, term 3. So yeah, it's not self-directed, that one, but it's obviously supervised. Okay. Question 2 from earlier. So yes, so can you pick up more, can you attend more modules on a kind of voluntary basis? They don't give you any credits. You can attend courses, and it's kind of encouraged within UCL. So you can, if you really want to benefit from something, or you see something I really want to go there, you can do that. I can't guarantee. You can apply for it, and if the module lead from that other module in the program lead agree that they just host an additional student, that would be fine. But I have to say that it really depends on them agreeing. I kind of understand where you come from with that question, because you look at all this stuff which you could learn and you think, oh wow, that's so exciting, I want to learn all this stuff. I just one thing I want to mention here, that the workload with regards to the particular term 2, with regards to the modules which you have, is fairly intensive. So depending on how far you want to stretch yourself, I mean, these courses are designed to stretch you to with regards to to your learning and to your development, and taking additional modules might be overstretching you. So it's just keep that in mind. But it depends on the individual students and how they can cope with workload and pressure. But so far, in my experience, I, I hear students more complaining that they struggle with not having enough time rather than having spare time. We do offer additional activities as it is within the Bioscience Entrepreneurship. Virginia, you want to make a comment as well?
I just wanted to mention, reading this question, it does suggest perhaps that students could choose other modules that are not currently on the list for term 2. And unfortunately, the way UCL works, these modules have to have approval a year in advance to justify their inclusion on that list. The modules need to be relevant. So I think Marcus's point is that yes, you might be able to attend other courses during that time if you have the energy, but you could not get credit for them. You'll still have to choose from the list that we've already compiled. And that is an ever evolving list. We look at it each year and we think to ourselves, are there other modules that would fit in to this that the students would benefit from? So we do add extra each year, but it's not possible right now for the next academic year to choose from a bigger list, if you like.
Unless you do additional voluntary modules, but that is a fringe activity normally. Okay. Could you perhaps briefly distinguish the two courses and which kind of students they are best suited for? Personally, I'm keen for the translational science aspect, but want to remain in upstream R&D. So the two courses, really, the fundamental difference between the two of them is that the research pathways in advanced therapeutics is for somebody who wants to be in the lab at the bench. So that's where you learn skills, lab skills, and your future career, you see that in the lab. And that may be within an academic environment, it might be biotech, pharma, it might lead to a PhD possibly, but it's somebody who wants to be in the lab. The Bioscience Entrepreneurship is somebody who does not want to be in the lab, really. Is somebody who wants to be active at the commercial aspect of things. There are other courses that develop entrepreneurship at UCL. Our course is aimed to equip you a little bit more with the upstream end of R&D. So ours is quite heavily focused on science. Obviously still trying to give you the business and managerial kind of backgrounds which you need, in particular about important topics such as intellectual property and so on. You have to know these things if you want to be active in this space. But at the same time, we want to give you a little bit more of the upstream understanding, and that's just because of our unique position at the Institute, where we have a lot of researchers that are active in the translational space who work together with clinicians at the Moorfields Eye Hospital. So we have this pipeline from bench to bedside, as people call it, where we're quite active in. Virginia.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this is a slightly grey area, because personally, if you're going to develop a treatment and start selling it, having an understanding of how long things take, how much experimental detail needs to be acquired before you can apply for phase 1 study or whatever, means that actually both courses combined would be the ideal solution. To have that business acumen as well as a really grounded understanding of the research. Unfortunately, in a 1-year master's course, it's impossible to give you everything. So it's a tough choice to have to make. And we have had some of Marcus's students already apply for PhD. So they've made the decision, actually, they want to spend a bit longer doing research before they utilize their entrepreneurship skills.
So with regards to the students from the Bioscience Entrepreneurship, just to give you a bit of a feel, so that course, we're now in the 2nd year. We started that 2 years ago, so the 2nd year is running. So you would be part of the 3rd year. So from the 1st year, we have some outcomes, and although it's a bit difficult to track precisely, but I would say about roughly half of the students who we've had And in the first year, we had around 43 students. Half of them have moved on into they've become analysts. They work in the VC space, and typically they work in companies now. So they roughly half of them are in that kind of analyst space. A few have moved on to carry on their education, whether they do an additional MSc or a PhD. And very few actually have, but some of them actually, a total of 3 of them have started their own companies. So they are active entrepreneurs currently. So that's roughly just to give you a bit of an idea of where they are. And the rest, they have moved into business, but not, for example, one of them works in a company that deals with clinical trials and so on. So there's different aspects of the bioscience space where you can be active in. Next question: do we know if lectures and seminars will run in person for the next academic year? Yes, we do, and yes, we will run them in person. The one thing I want to say here is that during the pandemic, we have discovered the advantages of hybrid teaching. So typically in our courses, we have the kind of more of a flipped format where the lecturers are encouraged to pre-record the lectures. The students watch those lectures, and when they come into class, what they do in class then is based on the recordings they've watched. So it's building on that kind of passive intake of information, where you work in seminar and workshops to develop that knowledge which you've learned there. So, but yeah, so we have, I would say, our lectures typically are online because that's the way we teach, but face to face, we actually come in physically. That has not changed really. So you come in, as I said, the session maybe for one particular module is once a week, maybe starting at 10 o'clock in the morning and on a Tuesday morning until 1 o'clock. And during that time, you're in class. But the aim is that you're not lectured at, just sitting there receiving passively information. We do that online beforehand, but that you actually build on that information during that time you're in class. Next question is, I have received a conditional offer in Bioscience Entrepreneurship, and I was wondering what potential future career pathways I could take using this degree. Yeah, so I kind of just answered this. Would it be limited to a particular field? Okay, that's a very good point. I really want to stress this, that neither of these 2 courses, the Bioscience Entrepreneurship nor the Research Pathways in Advanced Therapeutics, are specific for the eye. I really want to stress this. So even though we are at the Institute of Ophthalmology, and you will come across in our teaching, we use examples which are coming out of ophthalmology. But the point here is that we teach you generic skills. You will not be a specialist in ophthalmology afterwards. If you want to do that, there are other courses, more clinical courses that are also available. But both of these courses, they are aimed to equip you with very generic skills, and you can walk into any area after that. So that's is not ophthalmology specific. Okay, I think that answer is given. When does the bioscience course finish, roughly, in terms of the final month? So the thesis project typically has to be delivered early August. And then there is some other assessments that run a little later, but it comes down to how well you organized yourself. So some people submit their thesis earlier. So it's the 3rd term starts after Easter. So in the current year, we've just entered it. Obviously, the assignment is a big chunk of work. You can't just do it in a month or so. But typically, students are kind of finishing end of July. Having said that, a lot of students take on internships or placements in that third term, and they're doing their thesis kind of in their spare time based on what they learn during their internship. So they are doing kind of two jobs in the third term. So some of them have this internship, some of them can use what they do in their internship for their thesis, but that's not necessarily the case. So it really, the end is kind of is a bit gray when it exactly finishes. It changes from student to student. Obviously, there are deadlines for when you have to submit your thesis, and that's all I can tell you. So that's kind of in early August and to mid-August for some of the other assessments. So there's a portfolio you have to submit, and that comes a little later. But yeah. At the end of the MSc, does UCL offer any assistance in putting us in contact with international companies for job opportunities? The answer to that is yes and no. Firstly, our philosophy is not to basically to provide you with a list of here you can choose from that, offer you to stuff on a silver platter, saying here you have a placement if you want or not, and that's for the Bioscience Entrepreneurship. So we really encourage students to go out and create their own opportunities, and that has so far worked very well. We obviously we do have also a network of companies we work with who offer some placements, and quite often it's competitive, not all, so they may have one or two placement opportunity, and then students compete for it. So I would say the answer is we don't guarantee a placement or job opportunities. It comes down to students. For example, this year, one of my students, she applied 30 times, and now she's got an internship she really wanted, but it took persistence, and it's not easy, but we certainly trying to help you on that path towards that transition from your course into a professional life. And there as I said earlier, there's quite a network of academics at the Institute who are active in that space, but not that only at the Institute, across UCL, who have their own links to companies, who are part of companies, who know people in companies, who can facilitate that transition into the professional work world. Okay. Next question. Is there an induction for entrepreneurship, teaching, etc., for those from non-business degree related? That's kind of the point here, is that the course is exactly that. So that the course aims at people who have no business background, no managerial background, but to teach them to be confident in that space later on, so that you hold your own in that space if you go out into the business world. So that's kind of the whole point, so that the course is an induction for the business side of things, and to equip you. So here's the thing. So a lot of scientists, people with science degrees, really underestimate the complexities of translating things into applications, and for you to develop that understanding how complicated it actually is to move to commercial applications. So that's a kind of skill set which we want to equip you with. Okay, so yes, Rosie, is there any work that needs to be completed prior to the start of the course over the summer? No, there's no condition. This is not essential. We will give you a reading list, which you just broaden your horizon a little bit beforehand, and during your summer break, you can take a book with you to the beach if you want to. So see if you manage to read it. But yeah, there's nothing which we require you to do beforehand. Okay, the next question is for, I think it's maybe for Virginia, the placement duration during term 4 and 5. Yeah, that's for Virginia.
Yeah.
So the external lab placement is about 5 months. However, employers generally look for about 6 months to about a year of lab experience in their job description. Do you think that 5-month placement will be enough lab experience for the student that will look for employment after completing the MSc? Virginia.
Yeah, so I think this is a very good question and a valid point. But remember, Mohammed, that you will have done a term of lab experience in the first year. Then the lab placement in the second year is another 2 terms. So effectively, we're talking 30 weeks of lab work, which is so close to 6 months that I don't think employers are going to be not selecting you on the basis of that. And we will teach you to prepare your portfolio. You'll have 2 lab-based theses written up that you can take to interviews, etc. So I think that this was a difficult balance. We want you to go overseas and to gain all the benefits from that, but at the same time, going for too long, you may be limiting your applications going forward. You may feel that it's too expensive, etc. So this was a kind of happy balance. And I think it's worth mentioning that Amanda, who's on this webinar, she's been hammering on about the need for more lab-based, lab focus in term 1. So you have extra lab facility. Amanda, you might want to just make a few statements about this.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I'm trying to encourage a little bit more sort of lab experience in the first term for students on my particular model, which is the stem cells and eye repair. So one of the things that we're starting to do is to introduce students into the lab. So I work in a stem cell lab. So one of the first sort of practical experiences you'll get is to come into our lab and to actually work with some stem cells. So you'll be able to see them under the microscope. You'll be able to passage them, so to grow them on, and see, you know, what it takes to look after these stem cells. We've also introduced virtual lab experiences. So this came in during lockdown, where it was very difficult to get a lot of students all together in the same room. So part of the course will give you access to a virtual lab, where essentially you can work through all sorts of different practicals. And, you know, rather than taking the 2 days it takes to run a Western blot, for example, you'll learn all the principles, all the techniques, all the handling techniques within a virtual lab within about an hour. And we're also, like I say, we're also trying to increase more of the sort of the molecular type of experiences, so such as running PCRs and cloning and things like that. And as well as the sort of the practical lab experiences, we'll also give you more of the sort of the theory and the practicalities about designing experiments. So things like CRISPR gene editing will take you through the process of designing guides, and you'll design guides yourself. You'll learn to use molecular biology programs that we use as PhD students and postdocs, and myself as a PI. And all this can help you build up those research skills that you will need if you do want to go and work in a lab.
And just to add here, so don't forget, so in the first year, there is a lab-based project in term 3, and that in itself is several months. I mean, it's like typically 3 months or something like this, if 2 months maybe, between 2 and 3 months. So that adds on to the second year. So you actually end up with more than 6 months of research experience. And just to put that into context, so if Virginia or myself or Amanda, if we all run labs, wet labs at the institute. So if I hire, for example, if I look for a technician, I hire a technician, and I look at the CVs, I would not. I typically would not pick somebody with a BSc. So an MSc where they had some kind of exposure to the lab is kind of the first level, which I would start looking at for somebody to work in my lab at the bench. So they already come with a few months research experience. You know, they've held a pipette before, they know the basics. You don't have to start at square one with them. But then if I see that this person has already done a much longer stint in a lab somewhere, you know, in another setting where they have done something else in addition, that would certainly, for me, looking at CVs, make that person stand out. So, you know, if you say that, you know, companies typically look for 6 months research experience, it's not so much the number, you know, have you got 5 months, 6 months, or 7 months? I don't think that matters that much. It's whether you stand out or not. And I think with that degree, you will stand out from a lot of other MSc students.
And, you know, there are all sorts of extra benefits to working in such a research environment. So, for example, this week I'm organising a flow cytometry meeting at another department within UCL. And the Rpat students from this year, the 2 who are joining us, for example, they have been asked to act as judges for the poster session. So that's an extra skill. It's not on the list for the course. It's not something that we plan, but they can put it on their CV. And these are all extra bits of knowledge that I think will stand you in good stead going forward.
Yeah, with regards to CV building, both programs actually, we also have competitions, internal competitions where you know, the students can win prizes. Always looks good in CV, and where also students have to develop an online e-portfolio, whereas it's basically an online CV. So all of that aims to develop the student's career to move on afterwards into either commercial or in academic space.
So Marcus, there's one more question here about offers to international students.
Waiting for a decision on international is not a work camp experience. Yes. Unfortunately, these things take some time at UCL. We will start issuing more emails directly to you. So because UCL is so big, there is thousands and thousands of students that need to be processed. They all go through a central admissions office. And particularly this time of year, they sometimes struggle with processing. So some of the applications, they're kind of just sitting there until they get processed. We're now just started to push out some communication. So some of you should receive some of these in the next, if you, well, people who have applied will receive some more communications in the next few days, hopefully. But yeah, so it's a matter of being patient, and it's just, it takes some time for these things to be processed, that's all I can say. But it's unfortunately, we can't speed these things up. It doesn't go through our department, it goes through the central admissions office. So it's just a matter of time until they go through. Okay,
So I could answer the next question. The cohort size for the Bioscience Entrepreneurship course is much larger at the moment than the Rpat course. So Marcus has typically 45, 50, 55 students each year. And for the Rpat, it has started very small, but it has become a very friendly little group, and we hope to expand. So there are no limits on the student numbers for the Rpat courses as yet.
and also, well, at the moment we have not reached capacity, but there in terms of there is a kind of an upper limit on how many projects we can offer, how many projects we can generate for that course, because each student will have to be assigned to a wet lab project in term 3 in year 1. And then if they move on into second year, also there's as well. So these spaces are not unlimited. So let's put it like that. But there is, we have not reached capacity there yet. So there's
I think 15 to 20 places would be something we could immediately accommodate based on the numbers of lab-based projects that were submitted for this year's class.
But the plan is not to grow that course beyond, very much beyond that number, just so to put it into context. Okay, I think that brings us to the end. Thank you all for attending. As you can see there in the chat, Rosie put a comment. So if you have any further questions, please contact ioo.admissions@ucl.ac.uk. So you can see that there in the chat. If you have any further questions, and we will get back to you. Okay, thank you all for attending. And
thank you very much.